My name is Pete Tidwell, owner of the Mighty Baker. I have not always been the Mighty Baker, and I have quite a fun experience and fun life story to be able to tell you a little bit about that should hopefully be able to give you some insight into how to help your students that you are trying to teach and help to be able to find their careers. So a little bit of background for myself. I grew up here in Utah, went to high school here in Utah, and when I was younger, I started to work for my brother when I was 15 years old at Gandolfo's Deli. And that's a deli here in Utah. He owns a few locations. I started working there, and that really got me interested in working with food. I learned a lot about food, learned a lot about customer service, learned a lot about working with catering, and also I learned a lot about business from my brother. And we'll get into that in a little while as some advice that I have for students that would like to be a part of a food career, be a pastry chef, cake baker, business owner in the food industry. And hopefully my insights today will be helpful for you. Some of the other interesting things I have to share is I also have some interesting marketing and advertising background. So I ended up going to college to BYU and did not study anything having to do with food. I studied communications with an emphasis in advertising. And that was such a fun program, very creative, finding fun solutions for different businesses. That brought me to New York City, which I had a full-time job out there working for a huge company. I worked at L'Oreal out there, as well as Microsoft. And I did that whole corporate America thing in big New York City, lived there with my wife and kids, great experience. But it really wasn't for me. It really was a great experience and to help me to learn some good marketing skills and learn a lot about myself. And what I learned is I need to be in a kitchen or need to be in an active, creative type atmosphere. And while I was in New York, I actually shortly before I went to New York, I started getting into baking a little bit. But when I lived in New York, that's when it really hit me that I really wanted to pursue learning how to do it. And, of course, some of the natural things to do is let's go to pastry school. Unfortunately, the pastry schools in New York City, while I was living there, are very, very expensive and were not cost efficient for me to be able to go to school and then become a pastry chef and do that. And so I decided to be creative. My schooling in advertising taught me creative problem solving, and with that I decided to buy a pastry book from one of the schools there in New York City, and I taught myself through this textbook. I taught myself how to make pot au choux, different pastry doughs, different cakes, all different pastries, and I taught myself from the beginning to the end of that book. And also, I started doing some custom cakes. I would watch shows on the Food Network and I would see people make these amazing cakes and works of art of sugar and cake and chocolate. And I would be so amazed with the works of art that they did. And I'm like, wow, people do this for a living? Like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing. And that got me into doing cakes. And so I started doing people's birthday cakes and just for fun. And then I found by doing the pastries in the book and doing the cakes that I had some natural talent for it and that I loved it. I loved the energy that there was in the kitchen. I loved that part. And so then it gets me into a little bit of a different part of my story. And I decided to move back here to Utah with my wife and 2 kids at the time and to start my bakery business. I decided that I wanted to start a bakery business, but I knew that that wouldn't be able to bring in money for me right off the bat. And so I got a full-time job when I came back here to Utah and got a full-time job in marketing at doTERRA at their corporate office. And I went to work there and then started the Mighty Baker. And we're gonna go to another location here in my shop to talk about the Mighty Baker. So see you in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back. We are now at a different part in my bakery, in my studio, and you can kind of see back into my kitchen back here. It's a wonderful kitchen. I love it. It's super, super fun. It's my happy place where I get to create super fun works of art, and I just absolutely love it. So it's interesting though, because my studio that I'm in right now is not my first business location. It's my second. And we're going to get into that a little bit and hopefully be able to help share a little bit of insight and also some insight on how to help your students understand and know the tough business and also exciting business it is to get into the business of desserts and food. So the Mighty Baker. So first off, a question that's always asked to me is, where did the name come from? And when I was in New York City, my wife bought me a birthday present. She bought me an iPod, and she had it engraved on the back, Pete Tidwell, the Mighty Baker. And she started a blog for me, and she helped me kind of form into a business. And actually, it wasn't meant to be a business name at that time. It was just kind of a fun thing that she did. But then when we moved back here to Utah in 2013, the goal was to start my bakery business. We moved back, I got a job, as I mentioned, and I decided to start making desserts and sell them at the local farmer's market. Because, you know, if you're making food and you're making desserts, you want people to try them. You want people to give you feedback on whether they like it or not. Are people going to buy it? Will they like it? Will they not like it? And so I wanted to test the market by doing the Provo Farmers Market. So I did that. I did it every Saturday for 22 Saturdays, and it was such a fun experience. I got to meet some of the coolest people that I still stay in touch with, and it's 7 years later now. And that gave me a really good start. So it not only gave me a good start to do desserts and get some feedback there, but it was also a marketing tool to be able to help get the word of my business out to the community. That I did wedding cakes, I did custom cakes, and I was able to get that out there. So I ran my business from home for 2.5 years through the cottage food law here in Utah. And so I licensed my home kitchen as a business kitchen. And that's an interesting point, and that's something that I would love to elaborate on in your classroom someday, or maybe a future video, of how even a high school student, like getting fresh out of high school, could start an at-home dessert business for very low cost, and to be able to really start getting their feet wet a little bit in that business realm, if that's something of interest for them. There's a lot of opportunity there, and also doing markets and those kind of things. So I ran that for 2.5 years from home, and while doing a full-time job. So worked full-time, did desserts on nights and weekends, and hustled through that piece. And then I got to the point where I decided to open up an actual storefront shop. I opened a storefront shop in Provo by the Provo Library, opened that at the end of 2015, and the first couple years in business were incredible, such amazing experiences. We sold so many desserts from there, did hundreds of cakes out of there, numerous wedding cakes and amazing custom cakes. And I also had a great opportunity while I had that bakery to go on Food Network's Cake Wars twice. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes too, just so that you can hear some of those experiences and how that was. But those experiences brought so much great business and exposure to my bakery. And were also great experiences for me too, and professional development for me as well, to be able to compete on that level. And my business, I had my business storefront for 3 years, and it was such a fun thing. And my third year in business, things were going great. My lease was almost up, and we had some challenges. We had truly some challenges. We always had a rough parking situation. The location wasn't really the greatest location they could have chose. But when I first started out, I didn't have very much money, and I needed to find a place that I could open and not have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on lease and rent and not be able to make any money. And so, those few challenges came in. The city let me know that my parking was going to go away, and there was all this construction going on with the bus system. And, I decided a couple things. I decided it was really hard, but I decided to close my business down and rethink my business strategy a little bit. Because one thing that I did in my business is that I took on so many things. I did wedding cakes, custom cakes, catering, and I also provided upwards around 30 desserts, different variety, every single day. and it was crazy, and it was nuts, and it definitely took a toll on my life, on my energy. Probably took a couple years off my life, to tell you the truth, just with how many hours I had to put into that place. Definitely blood, sweat, and tears business, and I love it so much. It was such a hard decision having to close that down, but the silver lining to that is it's something that everybody, I think, needs to learn sometime, and I think you as teachers probably learn this often, that you have to restructure and pivot a lot, in whether it's teaching or whether it's in business or just life, and just having that flexibility and being able to, see, okay, let's step back for a minute and let's look at our situation and figure out a better way to do this. And that's kind of what I did. I spent all of 2019 rethinking and re-strategizing my business. And what I did is I came up with a few extra, different ideas and kind of bounced those off people. And one of the ideas was to do a do-it-yourself cake and cupcake decorating studio. And this idea came to me early on, probably back in 2016, 2017, and went down to LA for Cake Wars and noticed that there was another business very similar doing it down there. And it was one of the first of its kind, and I was like, whoa, somebody beat me to it. And I really need to get this open in Utah. And so I spent the next following years trying to develop the business plan for that. So all of 2019, I went back and got a full-time job at doTERRA, and I'm still there working now, 2 years later. And we'll get to that here in a sec. But as I was restructuring everything, I kind of, pared back, stripped my business down to the core of what the brand was, and then decided to build it back up. And kind of what I realized with my passion is that cake is my passion. I love desserts, and I love doing pastries, and I'll still do those, and I still do them from time to time to satisfy the customers that really like my stuff and would like it back too. But I'm not going to get back to what I used to do, because I really want to keep the focus and keep the focus of my passion, and that is cake. And as we did that, we went into developing this business plan, and we needed to find a location. We needed to find, simplify the business plan so that I could run the business while I was working a full-time job, because I knew that was one of the strains on my last business, is from day one of opening my storefront bakery, I took money from it, as in paid myself a salary. And I knew that in order to have success in my new business, I needed to keep my full-time job and then be able to have this business be structured so that I could have employees run it, I could train them, and they could run the day-to-day operations, and I could still run the other things, other part of the business, but that part could run. And that's what I did. And so the next portion of our little story is going to be talking about my new business, Cake Creation Studio by the Mighty Baker. And I'll go to another location here in my studio, and we can chat about that and let you know a little bit about the experience here and what we do and what type of experience that I've created for my customers. So we'll see you in a sec. All right, we're back in our studio at a different location here. We are located at the Shops in Riverwoods in Provo, and it is such a fun little location. Our studio has come together so fun. We've got cakes on display. We'll show some of those in a minute, and it is such a fun thing. So the concept of this business is to be able to take a lot of the hard part and not fun part to most people of cake decorating. And a lot of the not fun part to people is baking the cake, gathering ingredients, and then frosting the cake and those kind of things. And of course, we offer classes and workshops for people that want to learn those things. But our concept for the business here is to provide a cake that's frosted, covered in fondant as a blank canvas, and then also people can choose cupcakes, and then they get a kit, and be able to sit down and decorate right here in our studio. And really, it's as simple as it says up here. It's like you choose your kit, you gather your goodies, and you decorate your creation. It's a great, fun opportunity. So I'll walk you through some of the things that we do here, and I'll see you in a second. Then our customers get to come down the line here and pick out fondant, buttercream, sprinkles, access to all our tools, and to be able to decorate here. So it's such a fun experience. I love my new business. It's a fun opportunity. I continue to make custom cakes, mainly for corporate clients, and that's kind of what my focus is right now. We do some desserts as well, but we're really trying to focus on building out the studio and doing some fun custom cakes as well. And you can see in the background that my Power Rangers from Cake Wars, some of my Halo stuff from Cake Wars, some other cakes on display, and it's just a fun opportunity here. And I'll show you a few cakes here in a sec of some samples that we show people, and then we're gonna get to some Q&A. All right, hopefully the lighting's okay for these. But what we did is these are all styrofoam base cakes, and we went through and kind of decorated some different styles of cakes that people could try. And it's not necessarily meant for people to copy, but it's kind of an inspiration shelves here for people to be able to look at. All my cake decorator employees help customers if they need, give them guidance. Not meant to be a one-on-one thing, but it's a super fun experience, and it's awesome. Okay, on to some Q&A. See you in a moment. All right, we're back here in the studio, and now we're going to do a little bit of question and answer. I know not all these questions were submitted by all of you here, but I did receive some questions that could be helpful in me answering them to help you. So hopefully these will come in help for you as you listen to this conference, and I hope that the things that I shared with you today can enlighten you in some way and that I gave you some value. So number one question is, when and why did you start baking or exploring the option to become a baker? So with this question, I did cover this a little bit previously, but I started baking when I was a kid, and that's really when I started baking, but I didn't have the love of baking and wanting to explore that as a career until shortly before I finished college. And I think, I'll get to this in a minute with some advice that I have, but I think that it was a creative outlet for me in the beginning. Rather than a career option, it was more of a stress relief hobby type thing that then turned into something that I was really good at. And so that's a way to answer that question. Hopefully that is helpful. The next question is, what were your experiences like on the Food Network? Highlights, challenges, those kind of things. So it's been so fun. I have been on the Food Network 3 different times, on Cake Wars twice. The first time I was on Halo, and I won, which is super cool. So we did a Halo-themed cake, and these are some of our characters from the cake here, and it was such a fun experience. I went on with a friend of mine named Katrina, who is a great friend of mine, and she came on with me. We competed. We made a humongous 3.5-foot tall cake and ended up winning. And then later that year, so in 2016, we were invited to go back on Cake Wars a second time. And we were on a Champions versus Champions episode, and the theme was Power Rangers up top. So we went on that, and it was funny because the goal of that was, just to have fun and just, get to go back on a second time. And we ended up winning a second time, which was just incredible. Highlights of both of those were meeting the other bakers, having that opportunity to be able to compete on that kind of level. There's something about those sets and the stress and the time crunch that's there that really just sets me on fire, and I just love it. I love that pressure that's there. I love the pressure in the kitchen and deadlines and those kind of things. And so something I really feed off and really do well at. It's super, super fun. Challenges are probably time limits, even though I just said that I like those. they are challenges because you have a certain time frame that you have to get things done. And so that's definitely a challenge. Most recently, in 2019, I was on the Food Network's Halloween Baking Championship, and that was such a fun experience. It was great. I got to meet some amazing bakers. I got to the finalist episode, and so I made it through 6 episodes. I was on the final. Didn't quite get there to get a win, but I was able to make some amazing, super cool cakes. I'll add some pictures into the video that you can see of some of those cakes and desserts that I did there. Okay, next question. Where do you get inspiration for new flavor combos? And what are some favorite cake or frosting recipes? So inspiration can come from so many different places. As I go out to restaurants, or I taste new foods, or I see food on Food Network or other channels, oftentimes I'll have a flavor combination of something, and I'll think of a way that I can incorporate that into a dessert or incorporate that into something. So that's kind of where I get some inspiration. And honestly, sometimes I just mess around with flavors and just figure out something. On the Food Network, back to that, I had to deal with some very tough flavor challenges. I had to incorporate blue cheese into a cake, and it was successful. I did a vanilla cranberry cake with blue cheese, honey, buttercream, and the judges loved it. It was amazing. And then in the second Cake Wars, I had to use ketchup, and I made a ketchup cake with cream cheese frosting, tomato jam, and it was a hit. Again, they loved it. And so also, I guess on to the other part of the question is favorite cake or frosting recipe. One of my favorite recipes is Italian buttercream. It's a recipe that I learned early on in my dessert making. And the reason I like it is because there's so much technique involved. Like, you have to boil your sugar and your water to the right temperature, and then you have to pour it into your beaten egg whites that are the right consistency, and then you have to beat that to the right consistency, and then you have to add your butter in at the right time, and then you've got the different techniques that you have. And I love technique type things. So that's one reason I really like the pastry side of things, because there's, recipes that require technique, and I really like that. I like the techniques of baking. I love the chemistry of baking, and I love that piece of it. And that's super, super fun for me. All right, we'll do a few more questions in just a sec. All right, we're back. Here's some more question and answers for you. So the next question is, are there any current food trends in cakes or desserts? And also, is there a place to go where people can get a form of professional development for cakes and desserts? So answers to those questions. So the first one, current food trends in cakes. There's so many different ones out there, but one of the ones that I really like, and there's a lot of great products around this too, is painting cakes. There is a lot of products that haven't existed in years past that exist now that give you the opportunity to be able to paint on buttercream, on fondant, and on gum paste, and to be able to paint some really intricate designs. There's some great products out there, and I love that. I get a lot of my food trends and cake trends from people I follow on social media. There's a few individuals that I follow in specific that have very modern, very clean lines, and like geometric patterns. There's a lot of that going on. And of course, when you get into wedding cakes, there's of course like a whole set of different trends when you get into that. And then a form of professional development. There's not really a ton, to tell you the truth. That's one reason that I've started to teach some classes, and I'll be launching more in the future, because there's not a lot of places for people. I mean, even somebody that goes to pastry school, there's very limited classes on like higher end cake decorating. There's basics, of course, but professional development, that's definitely a room that needs some help. And then as for like expos and those kind of things, there are plenty of those around. I've been to a few. There are, cake decorating expos. There's also competitions that are part of those expos. And so those are also ways of professional development. Honestly, I myself am self-taught, and I've taught myself through watching others and watching YouTube videos and really just trial and error. And so really, I think there's a lot of room in the industry for professional development, especially people that are into the careers too. Because it's hard for me to be able to find places to go to learn some more things. So that's the answer to that question. Next question, are there any go-to techniques or tools that I prefer when baking or decorating? So I talked about technique a little bit when it comes to recipes, but techniques when it comes to decorating, there's things I really love to do. I love to do airbrushing, I love to do painting, I love to do sculpting, not necessarily faces and animals and those kind of things, but I love doing realistic cakes. For instance, I'll pop some of these pictures up on the screen too as I talk about this. But I've done airplane cakes. I've done grill cakes, like barbecue grill cakes. I've done chair cakes, and all sorts of fun things that I really love those. I love being able to look at something that's real and then be able to make that into a cake. So I like that kind of technique. I love being able to imitate that. And tools, I mentioned airbrushing, a good set of paint brushes, and another tool. It's a more expensive tool, but it's one that I shelled out for and I needed to have in this location, is a sheeter. So when you're doing fondant decorations, covering cakes and decorations, you're always rolling out fondant all the time. And, it's your arms tired and it's not as efficient. But getting a sheeter has been amazing because it can help our productivity. And also, it also saves money too, because when you're hand rolling fondant, you can't always control the thicknesses that you're dealing with. And so with the right machinery and right tools, it actually helps my business save money because we're saving product. We're being able to roll out the fondant the same consistency every single time, and we can control that, which is really, really nice. Also too, you gotta have a good oven, you gotta have a good mixer. Preferred tools, brands, I'm more of a KitchenAid person than a Bosch person, but it just depends on who you are and what you like to work with. But a mixer is key. Of course, I could not deal without my huge mixer that I use to do all my bakery cakes and desserts and buttercreams and things. But any place, you gotta have a nice mixer and you gotta have a good oven that bakes your things really well. So, next question is, do I ever have to deal with dietary restrictions with customers? And how do I accommodate that? So that's a good question, because especially right now, there's a lot of different dietary restrictions, and not just dietary restrictions, but also just dietary choices and different trends in that way. You have the keto movement, and you've got people trying to do other types of dieting. And then you have the dietary restrictions like gluten-free and celiac disease and those kind of things. So it's really tough to deal with. Honestly, when it comes to things like celiac disease or highly gluten sensitive, I usually refer those customers to other bakers that specialize in those, because you can't really satisfy those customers because your bakery has had flour in it sometime. Really, in order to serve those customers, you have to have a bakery with equipment and everything that is purely just for gluten-free desserts. And you almost can't even let gluten in the building because it really will get in there somehow. So I usually refer those people to gluten-free specialized bakers that are in the area. But when it comes to gluten-friendly, I've done plenty of those before where people are it's more of a gluten-free choice, or it's just a low sensitivity. And so they're like, hey, as long as you are washing and sanitizing in between recipes, I'll be fine. And so those I will go ahead and take on. Of course, we're very aware of peanut allergies and those kind of things. We've had people come to us with dairy restrictions, and we've done our best to accommodate. But honestly, sometimes I have to come to a customer and say, I don't have a recipe that provides that satisfies your dietary restriction or choice. And so I won't be able to make that for you this time. And of course, that's tough. It's a tough thing to have to say to a customer. But I think that's something that you will face sometimes. But with that said, I think it's important to learn how to bake desserts that taste good, that satisfy a lot of those dietary restrictions, especially with like the keto movement. That's something that I haven't been able to produce something that I like, but I think it's an important thing in the future, in this industry. I really do think that. So maybe one of your students can be like the keto baking champion in the future or something. Anyway, okay, that's it on that question. And on to 2 more questions, and we'll see you in a second. All right, on to our last couple questions. We're back in my kitchen now, and here we go. Would you be open to visiting a classroom in high school for a hands-on demo? The answer to that is an absolute yes. I would love to come do that. I would love to come and even speak to a bigger group of students, just talking about my experience. I've actually done that a few times where I've spoke at Brigham Young University to groups of high school students almost going into college, talking to them about the importance of a college education and how I've used my college education even though I am not in the field that I did my studies in. And I think that's important to be able to see kind of real world, real life experience on how people have fared in their career. So yeah, and I would love to come do a hands-on demo, come teach how to make a specific type of recipe, those kind of things. That could be a super, super fun experience, and I'd love to. So reach out to me. It would be great. And last question is, do I have any advice to a high school student who wants to become a pastry chef or own a bakery? So this is kind of the bigger question of it all, and I want to spend some ample time on this one to be able to answer this question. So number one, if somebody wants to become a pastry chef or own a bakery, I'd say just have that as your goal. Work towards it. And start as early as you possibly can to learn all the necessary things to be able to do those things. So I'm going to kind of pick that apart a little bit because, if you want to just become a pastry chef, there is a path to that. There's a path to becoming a pastry chef, working as a pastry chef. You can go to pastry school, get a pastry certificate, get through that part of schooling, get an internship, get placement into a restaurant or a cruise line or whatever it may be, and you can get into a great pastry chef job and be able to climb that ladder if you want to be in that kind of realm. Definitely some possibility there. It's a very tough industry, very competitive, but there's a lot of fun things you can do there. And I have a lot of friends that work as pastry chefs and that I've met over the years that have had just some fun experiences there. There's great pastry schools here in Utah. Of course, there's plenty outside of Utah that you can go to be able to study that. The next question of wanting to own your own bakery, that's a big question. And I think, those that want to own their own bakery, I would say probably the biggest thing, of course, you need to know how to bake and you need to, know how to make tasty things, but you have to know the other part of owning a bakery. It's not as easy as just baking a batch of cookies and selling it. There's so many different things involved that a lot of people don't realize. And of course, if you make a successful enough bakery, you can hire other people to do the things that you don't want to do. But the bottom line is when you're first starting, you kind of have to do everything. And you got to know how to do a lot of different things, because you got to worry about everything from marketing and advertising to managing your money, managing the money in and out of your business, your fixed costs and your variable costs and your cash flow and all of those accounting type things that may not be fun for a pastry chef or a creative baker, but you need to know those things, or at least the basics, and then be able to hire people to help do those things. Of course, when it comes to like accounting and CPA stuff and taxes, I hire that out and have done for years because I just don't want to really go there. But you do need to understand basic business and marketing principles. And so my biggest advice there would be take some business classes. You don't have to major in business. You don't have to major in marketing. But definitely become, savvy in that realm. And especially in today's day and age, if you're going to own your own bakery, you need to know social media really well. You need to be able to start a website. And of course, like I said, you can pay people to be able to do those things for you. But when you're first starting, you don't have money to be able to do that. And so if you want to own your own bakery, I would say try to start a home-based bakery. Try to start something that is low cost, low investment, and low risk. Because, I know I've known so many people that have got out of high school or got out of college and they just want to open up a bakery, so they open one up and, they borrow some money from mom and dad or borrow some money from somebody, and then within 4 months, they're out of money and everything's gone and they don't know what to do. And so I would recommend those that want to own their own bakery to learn those business principles. And I think the number one answer to this, actually, as I'm talking about this, I think that comes to my mind is I would suggest finding the type of business or an aspect in a business that you want to have. Excuse me. That you want to be able to have in your business. So what I mean by that is, like, for instance, when I worked for my brother at Gandolfo's, I worked for him for 14 and a half years. And I not only learned how to make sandwiches and salads and cakes and those kind of things from him, but I also learned how to run a business, how to treat customers, how to deal with customers, how to do catering, those kind of things. And those are things you don't learn in school. You learn those on the job. And so I would choose, and even if it's working for somebody for free for a couple months, like, going to somebody like myself, and even if I wasn't hiring and somebody came to me and was like, hey, could I come work with you for a couple months and work for you and, be able to see kind of what you do in your business, I'd definitely be open to that. And it'd be hard for me because right now I have a full-time job and don't have a ton of availability that somebody could shadow me personally. But I think that's a huge piece of advice. So if you want to own your own bakery, go work at a bakery. Go work at a cake bakery. Go, even if it's a grocery store bakery. If you want to learn how to run a bakery and know the basics of it, even a grocery store bakery would be a great place to go to learn some of those basic things. But if you want like a more specialty bakery, go and try and find a job or an internship at a bakery that you would like to have someday, if that makes sense. So that would be probably my biggest advice is, and I'm sure that's part of your, in placement, right? Or in high school students need to do internships and those kind of things. So if they can find internships in businesses that they are interested in, the better, because if they can experience that, that would be amazing. So apprenticeship type things. If you know a cake baker or a cake artist that you really think is amazing, try and take a class from them. Try and go and shadow them if they'll let you. Those kind of things. I think that's the huge piece. So with all that said, I hope that this has been super helpful, at least to kind of give an eye into somebody that has decided to build, a business around the food industry, and specifically the dessert industry. Hopefully it's been helpful. As I said throughout the video, feel free to reach out to me with additional questions. Hopefully they'll include some contact information in here. You can email me. I'll put my email right here. And please reach out with questions. Love to answer them. And also too, like if you have students that are super interested or have questions too, like I'm open for that kind of thing, to be able to answer. And I'd love to come visit your classroom. I'd love to come speak at an assembly or a bigger group of high school students. That would be a super fun experience for me, and I believe that I really could bring value. Last of all, you teachers are great, inspiring people, and help students. I don't know if most high school teachers understand like the power that you guys have and the influence you have. I had a couple teachers in high school that really, really cared, and really helped me through a lot of tough things, and believed in me. And so I really feel like you guys have a great place to be. A lot of high school kids, a lot of kids in general don't have, love at home or love in their lives, and even to have like some teacher to care for them in one small way goes a long way. So you teachers are awesome. Teachers are amazing. You go through a lot for us. Sorry that this conference is not in person. I'd love to, meet all of you, and to be able to, actually see your faces. But this has been a great experience. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, and we'll see you later. Thanks so much. See ya.